Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. We're going to spend some time today, a little bit later, talking with Max Lucado about his latest book, which is really a collection of things he said about dads. It's going to be a great Father's Day present, or one that you might want to obtain. Second hour today, we're going to be talking with our good friend Alex McFarland. He's been with us many times before as we talk about the subject of apologetics, but this time we're going to get into the issues, and he's certainly good at speaking to that. 10 issues that divide Christians, and some of those are issues we've dealt with before: abortion, homosexuality, pornography, but some others are a little broader: American exceptionalism, environmental stewardship, pluralism. So we've got quite a lineup today, but in this first half hour, before we get with Max Lucado, I want to come back to one of the issues in the news, and certainly one of the biggest issues in the news right now has been the scandal of the Veterans Administration, the VA scandal. We've posted some information and material that you might want to see, and you can find it on our website, pointofview.net, under the articles section. Let me also mention that we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at some videos, and we have one of the videos posted there by Alex McFarland. And if you'd like to watch the live broadcast of Point of View, you can see that on the webpage there as well. So lots of things that you can find at our website, pointofview.net. Let me, though, start off with one that I have posted. John Fund, who's been on the program with us before, used to be with the Wall Street Journal, now with National Review, says that there are some lessons we can learn from this scandal. He said, if our government has any obligation to fulfill its many promises on health care, it should be first and foremost to the men and women who served in our armed forces. But the scandal over hidden waiting list at a growing number of veterans hospitals, and he says 7 so far, and that number seems to be increasing, wherein dozens of veterans died while waiting months for vital treatment, and then the VA covering up the lengthy wait times, should make everybody wonder whether we can place our trust in a government-managed healthcare system. Good point. First of all, if there's ever been a place where you would expect the government to do it right, it would be in providing health care for those people who are willing to defend this country, risk laying down their lives. And of course, this Memorial Day weekend, we're going to honor those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. That certainly would be the case. So as he then makes the case, if we couldn't get that right, wanting to treat our veterans who deserve maybe an extra measure of grace, an extra measure of honor. I mean, all of us are equal, but there is a sense in which I have such high respect and value those who served in the military. If we can't get that one right,
what is the chances for you and me, just Joe average citizen, to get it right if we end up with a healthcare system that looks a little bit like the VA? So I think he makes a good point. He goes on to say that the Dayton Daily News reported on Sunday that its investigation of a database of claims paid by the Department of Veterans Affairs shows the words delay in treatment were used, are you ready for this, 167 times. The VA paid out a total of $36 million to settle the claims. This is certainly, there could be more of those as we see this investigation. And so this has become sort of death by delay. Some people said these are death panels. Well, not necessarily. It's not like somebody sat down and said, okay, we're going to decide whether this veteran gets this treatment or this one. It's simply death by delay. And we are now talking about dozens of individuals. Some count up to 100 individuals in that regard. And so he asks the question, are there lessons in the VA scandal for the rest of us if indeed Obamacare survives and even expands? And he says, you betcha. The first lesson is that government expands taxpayer subsidies for health care, and as a result, the demand will then always outstrip the supply. He quotes from President Obama in a speech given a little less than a year ago, in which he was talking about the fact that we are not pleased with the backlog, but then points out that the reason the increase in efficiency did not take place was because there were new veterans in the system, came in because of Agent Orange, PTSD, or whatever. And of course, that's exactly the point John Fund is making. When we are providing more money and we're encouraging more people to get involved, then the demand will always outstrip the supply. And thus you get these waiting lines, these very long lines and waiting lists and things of that nature. He went on to say that a few weeks ago, President Obama had to admit that he found the fiasco of the healthcare.gov website also unacceptable. Last week, his reporter said how mad he was. I won't go into all the words he said there. But there's a lot to be concerned about, because according to Michael Tanner of the Cato Institute, he knows that more than 344,000 claims for veterans care are backed up and waiting to be processed. It takes an average of 160 days for a veteran to be approved for health benefits, and the VA itself estimates that it has an error rate of about 9%. Which is probably low. We know how that goes. And according to the VA figures for this last year in which we have full figures, which would be 2012, as reported in the Washington Post, a veteran who takes an appeal through all the available administrative steps faces an average rate, are you ready for this? 1,598 days. That's more than 4 years of waiting if you take all of the appeals. Now, let me just ask you, if you've got a medical condition and you believe that you need surgery for it, you need a particular drug that's not in the formulary, and you are not getting satisfaction, are you willing to wait more than 4 years to get that resolved? And of course, I think we all know the answer to that question. He went on to say, Obamacare will dramatically expand access to the healthcare system at the same time that many surveys show doctors are likely to retire or cut back their hours. It's almost inevitable we'll see more waiting list scandals as the need to ration care grows. He concludes, the first half of his article, I won't read the second part of it, by saying that this is the record of many single-payer healthcare systems. And both President Obama and the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid have said that establishing a single-payer system is their long-term goal. John Fund reminds us that back in 2003, then candidate Barack Obama, actually even back then you can say actually state senator or Barack Obama, told an AFL-CIO conference, I happen to be a proponent of a single-payer universal health care plan, but as many of you know, we will not get there immediately. Then you update to when he was a candidate, saying something very similar. Also, he points out that Majority Leader Harry Reid told a PBS interview in Nevada in October 2013, what we've done with Obamacare is a step in the right direction, but we're far from having something that will work forever, unquote. Then when asked by a panelist whether he meant that ultimately the country needs a healthcare system that abandoned insurance as the means of accessing it, he said, yes, absolutely yes. So, first of all, we are learning some lessons from the VA scandal about supply and demand. But when we come back from the break, I want to read a piece from Newt Gingrich, which I thought was very well done as well, because it maybe shows you the scope of the problem. And his argument is that you don't solve this problem simply by getting rid of the secretary or the undersecretary. This is a systemic issue.
And as I've said before, I know lots of good people that work at the VA, but you put good people in a bad system, and the system wins. And we're going to talk a little bit about the system, but also just before we get Max Lucado on a little bit later this hour, I wanted to give some of you, if you have comments about the Veterans Administration, maybe you've had some experience with it, maybe you have some concerns or would like to add some facts or figures to the table, we're going to open up the phones a little bit earlier before we get to our other guests. So if you'd like to join us in this second segment, give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. I'll come back with some comments about Newt Gingrich, and then if you have some comments, I want to hear yours as well. Let's take a break. We'll be back right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
You know, James Friedman laments in a recent editorial that it's not easy to find a country with a higher corporate tax rate than America's 40%. He finds that even more remarkable since many of the countries with truly oppressive governments have a lower and thus more competitive tax policy. A recent study by KPMG accountants of rates of 130 countries only turned up one country with a rate higher than the United States. The top rate in the United Arab Emirates is 55%, but is generally applied only to foreign oil companies. Earlier this month, I was teaching in Hungary as I read about the study of tax rates. I remembered that Hungary had a lower corporate rate. I looked it up. The tax rate in Hungary is 19%. 5 countries border Hungary. 4 of them have an even lower rate. Serbia is 15%, Romania is 16%, Slovenia is 17%, and Ukraine is 18%. Slovakia has a slightly higher rate at 22%. But all of these former communist countries have a corporate tax rate less than the United States. The high corporate tax rate in America is driving U.S. companies overseas. I'm not just talking about companies moving to Mexico and China. Many are moving to Europe. The drug company Pfizer announced its desire to purchase AstraZeneca and reincorporate in the United Kingdom. The U.S. Treasury would take a big hit if Pfizer leaves America. You know, it isn't just the corporate tax rate that would hasten their departure. Most European countries do not impose a tax on profits made overseas. That allows them to repatriate profits without paying the punitive tax that they would have to pay as a U.S. company. More than $2 trillion in foreign profits are held overseas by American corporations in order to avoid taxes. You know, America's high corporate tax rate is higher than nearly every country in the world and will continue to drive businesses overseas. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. I want to talk a little bit longer about the VA scandal, but I'll move maybe away from the scandal for just a minute, just to talk about the struggle that any individual, president, secretary of the VA, whatever, has in trying to deal with the very large bureaucracies that we are dealing with right now. To illustrate this point, I'll get maybe ahead of some of the things that were said in the piece by Newt Gingrich, and I'll backtrack, but he points out that the workforce for the Veterans Administration is larger than the Marine Corps. That kind of got my attention. More than 300,000 full-time workforce, only about 200,000 Marines. Of course, with the cutbacks, the president may eventually only have 150,000 Marines. And so you can see that, first of all, this is an agency that's larger than the U.S. Marines. By the way, probably a lot less discipline than the U.S. Marines as well, but that's another story. And it treats 6 million veterans each year at more than 1,400 different sites, including hospitals and clinics and nursing homes. Last year, about 9 million veterans enrolled in the VA, or better than 1 out of every 3 veterans. And just to give you an idea of the training program alone for the Veterans Administration, according to that, they train about 90,000 healthcare professionals every year in their medical centers, which means that almost half, actually more than half of all the physicians in America at one time or another receive some of their training at the VA. So we're talking about a very large agency, and trying to bring it into the 21st century with some of the archaic, if you will, and I hate to be blunt, 19th century and early 20th century kind of technology is part of the problem. And I think you'll see the point in just a minute. But let me read a little bit from Newt Gingrich. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212, because he talks about the fact that, sure, you might have the secretary, Eric Shinseki, resign or be fired. Of course, we have the undersecretary who was going to step down anyway, nevertheless step down. But as he points out, scapegoating one or even a team of senior leaders will produce only marginal results and ultimately be drowned out by an enormous bureaucracy. The real challenges in developing a 21st century Veterans Administration are challenges of systemic reform and go far beyond, as he says, any single person or even the senior leadership team. So trying to fix this by just letting an individual go is not going to be enough. And as Newt Gingrich likes to do so often, he reminds us what we have in the private industry sector, for example. Businesses have used information and communication technologies to create highly reliable, efficient, personalized, and instantaneous news systems. And a good example he mentions is an ATM, an automatic teller machine. Anywhere in the world, and I have been in various parts of the world. Just recently I was in Europe, for example. You can go to an ATM, stick in your card, and within seconds get cash from your bank account. And there is no bank teller involved. There are no business hours involved. At most banks, even deposit slips are becoming a thing of the past. So that's the way it works in the real world in the 21st century. Yet that is not what is happening here. That kind of breakout thinking, that kind of technological development is not happening. Partially because of the size of the organization, as I mentioned, 300,000 full-time individuals working in the Veterans Administration, treating 6 million veterans every year in 1,400 different venues. We're talking about hospitals, clinics, nursing homes, and all the rest. And that alone is very significant. But also, of course, the fact that it has expanded so quickly. It has grown from 220,000 to 314,000 with additional government employees and all the rest. And so here are the problems. The average wait time right now in a VA facility is twice what it is based on the national average for a typical emergency place, emergency room. And if you look at a few that they have actually done some investigation on, he found that in a few of those cases, the wait time was 12 times as long in a veterans facility as it was for the national average. This, again, illustrates some of the problems because you are talking about individuals waiting longer and longer periods of time. Let's talk about another issue. An individual in active service in the Defense Department then goes and leaves and wants to go to the VA. What's the wait time there? 175 days. Why is that? That's because the Department of Defense in the VA has spent $1.3 billion with a B, $1.3 billion to build a joint electronic medical record system for their healthcare services. And this was an attempt so that you would have an easy transition from those individuals who had records with the Defense Department and transfer those to records that would be in the VA. And that was announced recently as a failure. And this is on top of another $2 billion the Defense Department spent on a failed upgrade to its own electronic medical system. So what you can see is there is no way in which even one form of the government, that is the Defense Department, can speak to the other form of the government, the VA, without this kind of lengthy transition. So whether you're talking about the wait delays of an individual in a clinic, or you're talking about just the enormous amount of time it takes to transition from the Defense Department to the VA, you can see that we've got some real problems. And these, in a sense, have not that much to do with the other delay or the scandal in the first place. So, again, you can see that there are some very significant issues that need to be addressed. Let's take some phone calls. We'll start out in the state of Texas. John, what story would you like to share with us today?
Yeah, I just came from San Antonio yesterday. And it's kind of sad that none of these veterans that I'm seeing, a lot of guys, I call him the last one because they're hanging out here. And they're going through a lot of troubles that I've gone through 34 years trying to get at least what little benefit that was promised to me, $89 a month. But that didn't happen. Come down to it, I ended up getting a disease in my ear. Ate my eardrum back and ate the whole thing. So I would hold in and out of the hospitals in the service. All in all, come down. I finally get all this pill go through this process that you're right about these doctors. That I got sent to this doctor in San Antonio outside of the VA, and this doctor here is telling me that your eardrum is looking good. I have an eardrum now, so. And then I'm getting an audio at the same time. The lady is telling me I don't have a disease. I showed her a medical paper I had from the VA. It shows middle ear disease. Where are we going with this? So these doctors are outside. You're right. I believe they're doctors that used to work for the VA years ago, because this doctor that I saw reminded me of the doctor that did surgery twice on my ear. So I'm thinking, God, Lee, where are we going? And we're seeing all these good old-timers. You talk about soldiers, yes, good ones, good men have gone. And now the families are there struggling, and this is going on that now, hey, who's going to get the money they're finding? Well, somebody's got to answer to this. Somebody's got to step up to the plate for us.
I would agree. It seems to me that we need some accountability. But again, one of the things I want to caution all of our listeners, including you, is that, we might ask for the resignation of the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. And that will maybe make a little bit of a difference, but I don't think it's going to make very much, because a lot of it has to do with some of the changes that need to take place in the system. And so over the next couple of weeks, we'll certainly be hearing about this. It couldn't have come at a worse time. Let's recognize that we're just a few days away from the Memorial Day weekend, in which we're going to be honoring the veterans. And certainly at a time when we would be wanting to honor them, there's this reminder of what has happened as the veterans scandal. And the scandal had to do with the cover-up in what are right now are 7 different locations, 7 different states, but I suspect that's going to increase as we know more. And the situation in which delay in treatment basically left a death because of the delay in treatment. But what I wanted to do in the few minutes we had here in the first half of the program today is expand your vision a little bit to recognize that some of these issues are systemic and really need to be addressed. And that is the topic of perhaps another day, but it illustrates again why we have said time and time again not to look to government as the solution to some of your problems. Because when we have talked about the size and scope of the government, remember when we had Jim DeMint on, who used to be the senator from South Carolina, now is the president of the Heritage Foundation, he points out that the largest company in America, the largest Fortune 500 company, wouldn't even be the second largest government program in the federal government. That's how big this government is. And when you get bureaucracies this big and entrenched with all sorts of patterns, it's very difficult to bring about change. And the only way you're going to bring about change is when somebody really wants to step in and really bring about those changes, not just have the window dressing of having a scapegoat and firing somebody and sending them packing. Of course, we haven't even seen that lately, and so it illustrates the kind of reformer that we're going to need in the Oval Office in the future if these problems are going to be addressed. And, of course, it also tells us what it could be like under the Affordable Care Act known as Obamacare, if indeed we end up with a system for all of us, which is the system right now we've given to those who deserve perhaps the greatest
opportunity and the greatest amount of service. We haven't served our veterans well. Let's take a break, though. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Max Lucado about his new book, Dad Time. We'll be back right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
This is an interview I've been looking forward to for some time. Max Lucado is with us, and of course you know him as the leading inspirational author in the United States. His writings have been turned into best-selling books, videos, devotional songs, greeting cards, Bible studies, commentaries. A while back we talked with Rick Santorum about a movie that was produced based on some of his writing. His most recent adult book was You'll Get Through This. That marked his 30th adult trade book, but we're going to be talking today about this collection of various things he's written over the years in many of his books called Dad Time. You are familiar with him, of course, as an individual that has been such a best-selling author. More than 100 million Lucado products have been printed in 41 languages, including 80 million books to date. And he, of course, has served the people for so many years faithfully there in San Antonio at Oak Hills Church. Max Lucado, always a delight to have you on Point of View.
Oh, it's my treat. Such a warming thing just to hear your voice. It sounds
well,
great.
We go back a few years. We won't say how many, but can remember many a time we'd cross paths at national religious broadcasters. And, of course, oftentimes I'm sitting in the audience when you come and speak at Prestonwood Baptist Church. And so I've certainly just been so pleased and just thrilled at how God has used your gift of writing to encourage so many. And what this book is, first of all, it's just a perfect book for Father's Day. It's been out about 2 weeks, published by Thomas Nelson. We have some information about it on our website, which we'll talk about more in just a minute. But it pulls some of the great little comments that you've made over the years about fathers and put it all together in a book, which I think dads will actually read because each one of them can be read fairly quickly, and it can be a great devotional guide to help them become better dads.
Well, I have a heart for dads, of course, because I am one. Number two, because I'm a pastor and work with families in crisis quite often, and find myself trying to solve the problem of a father who's been less than a father in a family, and the family living with the consequences of that. And so this book really emerges simply out of a father's heart and a pastor's heart, trying to help dads in this very, very important role that we have.
You know, before we get into the book, let's talk about that because, you know, you talk about the importance of fathers. You have daughters. I have 2 daughters and a son, and so we can recognize how important fathers are to the daughters. Certainly we all recognize how important fathers are to the sons, and yet we are talking more and more about a fatherless America where more and more young people are growing up in homes where dad isn't there. And sadly, I think, Max, this culture has sort of bought into this idea that, well, dads are kind of optional. And I think your book is a reminder that that's not the case.
I think you're right. I think our society has bought into a philosophy that says that the role of a mother and a father are indiscernible. Would that be a good way to describe it?
Sure.
They're indistinguishable. There's not uniqueness between the two. And I think there's something that's wrong, number one. I think there's a unique role of a father and a unique role of a mother. And when there is an absentee dad, the child has to compensate for that in a variety of things. Just very quickly, here's a couple of things a dad can do, unlike any other. Number one, he is the first picture that a child has of God. When a child hears somewhere along the way that the Bible calls God Father, whether it be through the Lord's Prayer, our Father who art in heaven, the parable of the prodigal son, the father whose son ran away. So many times the Bible calls God Father. Well, what's a young person going to do? They're going to say, okay, my understanding of the word Father is this man that, was my father on earth. And so we dads need to understand that we are the living definition of God to a child. Well, that's good news and bad news for all of us dads, right? We say, well, it's good news because it means I have a very distinct role, but it's bad news because none of us can live up to that. But, God gives us the strength. He gives us the ability to do so. But I just say that to say that's why a father is so important in the life of a child.
You know, one of the things I want to jump in real quickly, because Paul Vitz, wrote a book years ago called Faith of the Fatherless, and he was looking through all these biographies of atheists. And it's interesting, Max, what he found is that these leading atheists, the Bertrand Russells and all those kind of individuals that, and the Nietzsches and the Ludwig Feuerbach and all those, to almost a person, they had a bad father image of their earthly father. Either they had an absent or defective father, and he said, I think they really projected their view of the heavenly father from their bad experience from their earthly father. Now, I'm not doing that to lay a guilt trip on fathers, but just I think it once again illustrates your point about how much people's perception of who God is conditioned in part by who their earthly father was.
And I I'm not speaking from the vantage point of a researcher, a sociologist. I'm just a pastor, but I do pray a lot with people, and I do try to dig into people's hurts with them and help them understand why every fruit has a root, doesn't it, Kerby?
Yes.
And when people have the fruit of anger, the fruit of bitterness, the fruit of insecurity, as we pray into that, I'll say, can you trust God as your Father? And there's a wincing that happens, a resistance that often happens. And they don't understand, when you say Father, that's the person who neglected me, abused me, abandoned me. And so we have to redefine Father. But I have found that those who had a healthy father image or have a healthy father image, to be honest, they have a leg up on faith. That is not to say that those who did not have a healthy father cannot rebound. Sometimes just the opposite. They are stronger in their faith because they're more serious about understanding who God is. So, but that does mean that we fathers have a wonderful opportunity to help a human being understand who God is.
Let's talk about time for just a minute, because that's a theme that runs through your book. You tell the story, for example, of went in to help your wife out for just a minute and then having to hold the baby a little bit longer. But deeper into your book, you say something I'd never thought about before, and that is David wrote so many psalms, but he never wrote a psalm about any of his sons. And, of course, we can see when we look at 1 and 2 Samuel what happens because he really was disconnected from his family. And I think you have a very important principle we need to apply. In this fast-paced, frenetic, busy lifestyle that we have, dads need to spend time with their kids, don't they?
I think that's the way I said it in the book, is that children spell love with 4 letters, T-I-M-E. That's how they spell love. They want dad time. They want downtime. They want playtime. They want us there at bedtime. And let me just say, that is a fair expectation. It really is. They didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask to be conceived. They didn't ask to be placed in your family. And so if we think that it's unfair for our children to expect that we show up at their Little League games, at their recitals, that we take them to church, that we're there to tuck them in at night, if we think that's an unfair expectation and we can job that out to someone else, we're setting ourselves up for some major family issues. I find this, number one, very challenging, but number two, very encouraging, because no dad has all the wisdom in the world. No dad understands the answers to all the difficult questions. But every dad can decide, okay, I'm going to give time to my kids. I remember when my children were born, we were living in Brazil, and my wife and I were missionaries. Mm-hmm. And missionaries, we kind of think the whole world depends on us. We missionaries are kind of it's all up to me to save the world type mentality. And a man who had been a missionary for many years took me aside one time, and he said, Max, never sacrifice your family on the altar of Christian ministry. And I really took that to heart. And I repeat it to young dads today, and I'll say, never sacrifice your family on the altar of personal success, mm-hmm. for moving up the ladder. That is a bad trait.
Certainly is. We need to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation for just a few more minutes with Max Lucado. Let me mention that the book is titled Dad Time, Savoring the God-Given Moments of Fatherhood. It's published by Thomas Nelson. You probably can find it in your local bookstore, but we have a way in which you can order it if you can't find it there. We also have a very good article that was written by Max Lucado. It's kind of a short summary of one of the pieces in the book. It's entitled, What Makes a Good Dad? And I would encourage you to maybe print out that article. You might even hit the share button and put it on your Facebook page or blog. That would let some other people know about this conversation we're having today. And we have a web link to Max Lucado so that you can go to his website and find all sorts of great resources, and there are many. Audio, video, television, as well as all sorts of great ways in which you can connect up with him. And that's all at our website, pointofview.net. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more with Max Lucado about his book, Dad Time. And then in the second hour, we're going to get into some very important issues. All that coming up right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Continue our conversation today with Max Lucado. He's a storyteller, a preacher, an author, but most importantly, a father. You can learn some great ideas and even application principles here from the book Dad Time, a series of vignettes from many of the other books that Max Lucado has written, put together in a way that I think you're going to find very readable. And for those of you out there looking for a Father's Day present, this one has Father's Day written all over it. So let me recommend it. It is 175 pages, published by Thomas Nelson. We have information about it on our website. We have a link to Max Lucado's website and even an article that he has written on what makes a good dad. But Max, let's, if we can, talk about something else. I talked about the importance of time. One of the little short vignettes you have in here is study your kids. And interesting enough, I learned a little bit more about your father, who had crankcase oil coursing through his veins. He was a mechanical genius, apparently. And this is important, too, because we have to recognize that our kids may not be like us. We may not be that athletic. We might have a child that's very athletic. We may not have musical ability. A child is really interested in music or art. I don't think either of us expected that we'd have to learn about ballet lessons, but, you know, when you got girls, that's what goes on. And it seems to me that we, if we're going to be good dads, need to be good students of our children, understand their gifts and abilities, and encourage them in that way, don't we?
I feel really strongly about this principle that the greatest gift we can give our children is to help them discover their own gifts. The challenge is that we often assume that our children are going to be like us.
Yeah.
So if I'm a butcher and my dad was a butcher, then my child's going to be a butcher, and he may be. You know, he may have that inclination, that skill set, and those interests. But I don't think we should assume that. I think the greatest thing we can do is to see our children as a blank slate upon which we do not write our story, but we allow them to write their own. We help them discover their innate abilities and skills. There is an oak inside that acorn, and our joy and our job is to help that oak, come out of the acorn and discover what their unique capacities are. We do this by studying our kids, by watching them. When do they perk up? When do they look bored? What strengths do they have? Where do they succeed? What questions do they ask? What topics interest them? What topics do not? And we help them discover this innate path that God has placed within them. And then we become their big support system to help them succeed in that in a way that honors God. And I add that last phrase very deliberately.
Yes.
Because our goal is not just to help them, succeed so they can be rich. That's an empty, hollow life. But our goal is to help them succeed in the way they can honor God most with their lives.
I probably recommend more Max Lucado books than just about anybody, and one of the ones I would recommend at this point would be your book a couple of years ago, Cure for the Common Life, Living in Your Sweet Spot. Now, I think most, Max, know what a sweet spot is. That is, if you've ever played tennis, you know where that's in the middle there. I don't really play golf, but I understand there's a sweet spot there, but I'm not even going to try to figure that one out. I played baseball and know where that is. And the idea is that whether you're talking about your kids or yourself, I think that is perhaps the best book I've ever found to help us think through what our God-given abilities are. And I don't know about you, but even in my older age, I'm still discovering gifts and abilities that I did not know I had. And that's, I think, part of the Christian life, to really understand how God has made you uniquely to have a ministry and to really develop those gifts that He has put in your life and to use those to the glory of God.
There is no greater discovery than that. I would put that right behind discovering the grace of God. Discovering that God forgives my sins and has an eternal destiny. I would put right behind that then this idea that God has a unique assignment for me and for you, and none of us are identical. Each one of us is uniquely gifted by the Holy Spirit to fulfill a unique role in the kingdom of God. And as I fulfill my role and you fulfill your role and everyone fulfills their roles, then God is glorified and the kingdom is advanced. But whenever I settle for doing a job that I was not made to do or I'm not skilled to do, then I think I'm settling for second best in my life. None of us have the privilege of doing all the time what we do the best. Everybody has a job that requires some assignments that we would rather not do. But we should seek a life in which about 75 to 80% of our time is spent doing the most what we do the best. This creates happiness in our own lives. It creates fulfillment in God's kingdom. And I really believe it just makes for a person who honors God in a better fashion. And as a dad, if I can bring this out in my kids, not assume that they're going to be who I am and the way I am, then I have done them a wonderful favor.
Just a few of the wonderful insights in the book, Dad Time. One more real quickly, that is the issue of discipline, because we do recognize how important that is. You have a whole section here where you talk about we should be careful, be consistent, be clear, be compassionate. But I alluded to before, we are told as fathers not to exasperate our children, not to frustrate them. And it seems to me that if we have clear, careful, consistent discipline, we're going to raise up godly children that will honor us in our old age.
I think that's great. And we will be able to discipline our children once we have invested ourselves in their lives by giving them time, by listening to them, by understanding their situation, and by administering a discipline that fits the crime, so to speak, by understanding what they've done, try to understand why they've done it, and to be very clear. Here's why what you have done is inappropriate or unacceptable. And then after you've disciplined the child, to receive them yet again, to affirm them, to love them, and to let them know you're still with them. Now, Kerby, this requires time. You can't do this kind of discipline long distance. You can't do it through a letter. You can't do it through an email. You got to be there in the life of the child. And I realize that some dads say, well, that means I'm going to, I may have to give up this job, or I may have to change jobs. And I realize, that's the decision. That's it. But what's it worth to you? Right now, I have 3 daughters who are adults who bring me nothing but joy and happiness, and I wouldn't exchange one thing I gave up for them in my life. And I know every dad would say that, and I just want that for every dad. And so may God bless these dads and help them to make the right choices.
Just before I let you go, let me mention that we have a link to your website. And Max, just before we say goodbye, talk about what is there and available to some of our listeners today.
Okay, thanks for letting me mention it. MaxLucado.com is a place where people can go and sign up to receive a daily devotional that I send out every day. They also can listen to a little 60-second daily broadcast that I record. And just by tapping the button, they can get 60 seconds of encouragement or instruction. They also have access to just about anything that I've ever preached or recorded. There's access even to purchasing books and other media. So it's really a go-to place for anything that, whether it's a children's book or a grown-up book, anything I've ever done.
Well, it's just always a delight to have you on the program. Just another great book, and it's something that I would highly recommend to our listeners who might want to find a Father's Day present. And it is entitled Dad Time, Savoring the God-Given Moments of Fatherhood. It's published by Thomas Nelson, 175 pages. We've maybe only looked at 3 principles, and you can see how many other great resources probably are in that book as well. So thank you so very much, Max, for all that you've done all these years for writing, and thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Well, it's my privilege, and thank you, and all the best to you.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into a couple of really important issues. We're going to be talking with our good friend Alex McFarland, 10 issues that divide Christians. And so we'll get into some of the kind of topics that we address so often here on Point of View, as well as a few that we have never really addressed in any significant way. We have posted on our website a video by him that you can watch, and also an article that you can find helpful. We also, of course, have that article I mentioned just a minute ago that Max Lucado wrote on what makes a good dad, and I would encourage you to get that. We have a link to his website, and, of course, we have information on both of the books that we'll be talking about, all at the website pointofview.net. Visit us there. You can find lots of great resources, and I hope that you'll take the time to go to pointofview.net and click on some of those buttons and put to use some of the great resources we're making available to you today. We'll be back with our good friend Alex McFarland right after this.
Across the nation, this is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
And Jesus, I love you, how I adore you. I can't stop thinking about you. Jesus, I love you, how I adore you. I can't stop thinking about you.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, and if you'd like to join our conversation, we're going to get into some of the kind of issues that we discuss so often here on Point of View. Some are familiar territory. Some of the others are probably new to our conversation. And in order to get into this, we're going to be talking with our good friend Alex McFarland. He's a speaker, writer, really an advocate for Christian apologetics. He serves as the director of the Center for Christian Worldview and Apologetics at North Greenville University. Each year puts together a conference, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. And his newest book, 10 Issues That Divide Christians. We have a short video that you might want to watch, and I would encourage you maybe to hit the share button and put it on your Facebook page or your blog. We also have some information about the issues that we are addressing. We also have a link to his website, alexmcfarland.com. All of it is available at our website, and I've even posted one of his articles on American exceptionalism, something we don't talk about too often. Alex, always great to have you on the program.
Well, thank you very much. It's always an honor to be on.
Well, I thought we might, before we get into the book, talk about some of the great ways in which people can connect up with you. People can go to your conference. People can go to your website. Certainly, you have written quite a number of books that help us understand how to address many of these issues. So tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing lately and how people can either read you or even have a chance to meet you face-to-face.
Well, you're so gracious, Kerby. Thank you so much. You know, I'm a guy, like Josh McDowell once said, I'm on my way to heaven, and I want to take as many people with me as I possibly can. And I do a lot of traveling and speaking around the country. In fact, by God's grace, this year I've been in about 15 states to speak already this year. But as you mentioned, my website is alexmcfarland.com, my name. And there's information there on all the books, the speaking topics, and, you know, my calendar, which I've got about 30 things I need to put on there and update. But, you know, like yourself, I'm in churches to speak. I'm at conferences, speak a lot of universities. I've done debates with atheists, debated a few different profs on some of the issues like homosexuality, debated a Muslim imam shortly after 9/11. But you know, my whole thing is really the proclamation of the gospel, the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus, and that people can have new life. They can be born again through a relationship with Jesus Christ. But, you know, when you share the gospel, you're assuming or implying a lot of other realities, like the existence of God, the existence of the supernatural realm, the reality of sin, and the possibility of forgiveness. And so in our day and age, the good news often has to be supplemented with a lot of additional news to help people understand not only the historicity of Jesus, the reality of Jesus, but even their need of Jesus. And so whether it's preaching or writing or doing a radio broadcast, apologetics and evangelism, that's kind of my twofold focus.
Well, again, you've done quite a number of books that are on the 10 issues format, 10 most common objections to Christianity, 10 answers for skeptics, 10 answers for atheists. This one's a little different because you're talking about kind of a little more of an intramural discussion, but you alluded to the fact that you're in a church almost every week, and I know that's how you came to choose these 10 issues, because these are the ones that seem to surface when you're speaking at a conference, when you're speaking at a church, right?
Well, they did, and love the church in America. Like I said, I do a lot of seminars in churches, and I really care about awakening in America, and it's been a bit of a source of angst for me when I've been traveling, and throughout American evangelicalism, I've met thousands of people, and they've got the gospel. They've put your faith in Jesus, be saved. But they've not really gone on to get a biblically informed worldview about a number of other important issues, certainly the hot-button abortion issues of our day. And I would say there's no issue that has caused more controversy than the issue of homosexuality. Now, along that comes the nature of marriage and the questions about the legitimacy of gay marriage, and then questions about human sexuality and the roles of men and women. So I wrote this book. I began about 3 years ago to keep a journal of issues that, come up. And when I speak in churches, when people book me to speak, I'll do a lot of open mic Q&A. I love, open mic question and answer. And people would, ask me about my view on the environment or my view on welfare and compassion, and even things like questions like pornography. Why is that wrong? Profanity. Why is that wrong? And so the book, this is definitely my most political book, and it's not just a book. People very piously will say when I speak at colleges, they'll say, well, God's not a Republican, and I'll say, of course not, but on a number of issues, at least up until recent years, the Republican Party had taken issues that unequivocally were more biblically leaning than has the Democrat Party. But, as a church, there are some very key issues on which we're divided, and I think it's due to our lack of a biblical worldview in the hearts and minds of many Christians.
I might just mention, as you said, it's probably the most political of the books you've written, and you have a foreword by Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council, also one by John Stonestreet, of course, host of Breakpoint, an individual who's been on this program with us a couple of times and will be with us even this week in another venue that we're doing. But again, these are topics that transcend politics in the sense that we as Christians need to think through those. So I thought when we come back from the break, let me spend just a little bit of time maybe focusing on government per se, because that's your opening chapter, which sort of sets the foundation for some of these other issues. But I think these are topics that are challenges, and we need as Christians to think through these, as we do so often here on Point of View. And I would encourage you to find out a little bit more about this book. Alex McFarland with us today, and if you would like more information about some of the things that we have been talking about and will be talking about this hour, let me mention some of the resources that are available. First of all, we have under our articles section, I just posted one of the articles by Alex, which is one of the chapters, by the way, on American exceptionalism. We'll get to that a little bit later because I thought it was a little new or a little less familiar territory, and so as a result, you might want to read that. We, of course, have a link to Alex McFarland's website, and as we have mentioned many times before, we post some of these videos, and this is a fairly short video. It's less than a minute long, in which Alex, speaking into the camera, explains this particular book, 10 Issues That Divide Christians, and helps you understand the issue. But again, you can take that and maybe post it in your blog post or Facebook page or wherever you might want to do it, or just send it on to an individual that you know that might be interested in this book. It is published by Regal. Look for the book in your local bookstore, but we have opportunity for you to order it there as well. And as we get into these various topics, and you've sort of gotten a sense already, things like abortion and homosexuality, pornography, but also the role of government, just war, pluralism, pornography, environmental stewardship, and of course the one I mentioned a minute ago, American exceptionalism. We're going to cover as many of those as we can, and of course we'll open up the phones to give you a chance to join our conversation. Stay tuned, we'll have more with our friend Alex McFarland right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
You know, James Friedman laments in a recent editorial that it's not easy to find a country with a higher corporate tax rate than America's 40%. He finds that even more remarkable since many of the countries with truly oppressive governments have a lower and thus more competitive tax policy. A recent study by KPMG accountants of rates of 130 countries only turned up one country with a rate higher than the United States. The top rate in the United Arab Emirates is 55%, but is generally applied only to foreign oil companies. Earlier this month, I was teaching in Hungary as I read about the study of tax rates. I remembered that Hungary had a lower corporate rate. I looked it up. The tax rate in Hungary is 19%. 5 countries border Hungary. 4 of them have an even lower rate. Serbia is 15%, Romania is 16%, Slovenia is 17%, and Ukraine is 18%. Slovakia has a slightly higher rate at 22%. But all of these former communist countries have a corporate tax rate less than the United States. The high corporate tax rate in America is driving U.S. companies overseas. I'm not just talking about companies moving to Mexico and China. Many are moving to Europe. The drug company Pfizer announced its desire to purchase AstraZeneca and reincorporate in the United Kingdom. The U.S. Treasury would take a big hit if Pfizer leaves America. You know, it isn't just the corporate tax rate that would hasten their departure. Most European countries do not impose a tax on profits made overseas. That allows them to repatriate profits without paying the punitive tax that they would have to pay as a U.S. company. More than $2 trillion in foreign profits are held overseas by American corporations in order to avoid taxes. You know, America's high corporate tax rate is higher than nearly every country in the world and will continue to drive businesses overseas. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Continue our conversation today with Alex McFarland, 10 issues that divide Christians. He is a speaker, writer, and apologist, and we're looking at some of those contemporary issues. Forward by Tony Perkins, as well as a forward by John Stonestreet. And it seems, Alex, we probably do need to talk about government first, because if you don't understand the role and scope of government, a lot of these other issues don't make sense. So on the one hand, we have to talk about the fact that Christians are not looking for a naked public square where you strip religious values out of the public arena, nor are we really looking for a sacred public square where you force religious views on people in the government or in the public arena. We're just asking for an open public square, and we should be able to articulate biblical principles about these public policy issues, shouldn't we?
Absolutely. Well said, my brother. Well said. And you know, there are a couple of things that have really been drummed into the public consciousness over the last few decades, like the notion of pluralism, but meaning, as some understand it, that all viewpoints are equally valid. And you'll hear that we're a pluralistic society. We are, in the sense that you can believe whatever you want to believe, but we definitely, our country was founded, our governmental documents written in the milieu of a biblical worldview. The belief in objective moral values, fixed standards, and absolute truth, and the sacredness of life, and that the justice was something that was really only properly carried out in light of the character of God and the moral parameters that God reveals. Now, here's my point. When I'm at universities and people, will, repeat platitudes they've read online, like, you can't cram religion down people's throat, and, America is a secular nation. Here's the thing I say to atheists. I'll say, okay, you don't want to be a theist. Okay, you don't have to believe in God. You don't want to be a Christian, be an atheist. But don't destroy the very context that gives you the freedom to not believe. See, here's the thing. The bad news is, for an atheist or a rigid secularist, the bad news is we are founded as a Christian country. We were founded on biblical principles with belief in God, belief in moral absolutes. If you want to be the America that we've been now for 238 years, you can believe or you can not believe. You can be heterosexual or not. But don't destroy, don't tear down the very milieu that gives you the freedom to safely not be a believer. And so here's what people want. They want to impose their real relativism, hedonism, lawlessness on the culture at large. And so that's taking the pluralism that many people think we're all about way too far. And I believe it endangers our very Constitution.
Since you mentioned pluralism, I think that's an idea that we're pluralistic and that we have different kinds of views. But this radical pluralism in our world today that you talk about is the idea that all paths lead to God, that it really doesn't matter what you believe, this postmodern idea that there's no view of truth. That was not the view of the founders, and frankly, I don't think that's the view of most Americans. They sort of hear that, and it sounds good to tolerate different viewpoints, but at the same time, everybody believes in some kind of absolutes. Even the person that denies absolutes has to use an absolute to deny absolutes, right?
He does. See, here's the thing. They infer the components of a theistic worldview, even in their attempt to undermine a theistic worldview. They believe that there's no truth, and yet they'll assert that it's true. There's no truth. There are no moral absolutes, but yet it's wrong for you to, encourage others to adopt your values. And even on the university campus, when people are very radical about there not being any ultimate truth, and they'll say, words don't even mean things. And I have this come up almost in every debate. They'll be, words don't mean things. And I'll always say, yes, go on. And they'll say, we were primates, we only evolved, and we were hunter-gatherers, and we would grunt. And, we're only attaching meaning to sounds. And I'll say, okay, so in other words, you're telling me to, get a weapon and go on a killing spree, right? And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, you've just told me how words can mean whatever I want them to mean. Words don't have transcendent meaning. So in other words, Shetland ponies are made of chocolate sauce, right? And students look at me like, what in the world? And I'll say, look, just understand, you've got to use words even in your attempt to deny the efficacy of words. You are using words and believing and assuming that they have a certain objective meaning. You're assuming that I hear and I understand that meaning. And look, if the radically pluralistic worldview you espouse were actually true, communication couldn't even be possible. I mean, the very fact that we can converse and have a meaningful exchange of ideas is because words mean things. And I tell students when I'm at campuses, I'll say, look, if you don't believe words mean things, you just be on an airplane and make a joke that's inappropriate about national security. A U.S. Marshal will school you in epistemology, and you will find out that words mean things. Yeah,
I used that example from you in one of my commentaries recently, and I learned a great deal from you and also maybe from Greg Kokel, his book Tactics, about how to argue with people that deny reality. You really can't live in a world where you deny reality very long, because after all, this postmodern world that everybody tells us we live in, we still believe that 1 + 1 = 2. We still believe that bank accounts should be rectified. We still believe that stoplight should mean red when it's red and green when it means go. And, you can't live in this world where words and values and ideas can mean anything you want them to mean. I mean, it sounds real tolerant, but it isn't very effective. And it's a very dangerous way to live if you actually started out into the real world with that kind of mindset, right?
Well, it is. I tell people for a decade I've been using this illustration, and I'll say, look, I want to tell you 3 people that you had better hope are absolutists. Your CPA, your airplane pilots, and your surgeons. Because your CPA reports your taxes accurately. An airplane pilot, seat backs, tray tables up, my altimeter says that we're 500 feet about to touch down, but, I don't know. I'm in the mood for a fast descent. In other words, we're just about to crash. So here's the thing. I would say to people, and especially to Christians listening, and I know there are probably a lot of believers, and you love the Lord, but really to engage that, a neighbor or a family member who is a liberal or thinks homosexuality is okay. There are a lot of people listening, no doubt, that are Christians, but you almost feel like to engage people and to tell people that certain things are morally wrong, you think that would be impolite. But here's the thing, Kerby, to talk about God and the Judeo-Christian worldview and morality, for many people that's a bitter pill to swallow. But I would submit that is a less bitter pill than the pill we are currently ingesting, and that is the road to societal chaos.
Yes.
Law. I mean, even the point of law, the people can speak. Defensive marriage amendments can be put on the books through due process, voted on, and absolutely, legitimately, made law, and activist judges can overturn them. And, we used to have a sense of moral propriety, and our kids were innocent longer and had a respect for life and a respect for human sexuality and modesty. And if you look, virtually every cultural boundary has either fallen or been forcibly torn down. And I've got to say to the Christian listening who really doesn't feel like religion has a place in politics, look, friend, how far do we have to go? How far down the road to lawlessness do we have to go before we are willing to say, we've got to save a nation, and we've got to, popular or not, we must speak truth to this culture that's lost its way. If 2014 had been 1776, Kerby, would there even have been a revolution? Because, the revolution was predicated on some moral absolutes having been violated.
Sure. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into a couple of other issues. We've sort of talked a little bit about government and kind of bled in a little bit to the issue of American exceptionalism and also pluralism. Let's come back and talk about social justice, discernment. Of course, we've also talked about this issue of homosexuality. What about this idea of so-called marriage equality? Those will be a few more issues we'll put on the table with our friend Alex McFarland. If you're just joining us, the book is entitled 10 Issues That Divide Christians. It is a book that you can find in your local bookstore. It's
published by Regal, but we also have information about it on our website, pointofview.net. Please go there. You can find the video, you can find a link to his website, and information about the book. We'll be back right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Privileged to have with us for a little bit longer Alex McFarland, speaker, writer, and apologist, and he is the author of the book 10 Issues That Divide Christians. And Alex, I thought before we take any phone calls, we might, since we've been talking about government and some other aspects of this, you have a chapter on social justice, and I'm so grateful you put that in there because this is a good example of a word that are a series of words, two words that really are misdefined, misinterpreted. We need a great deal of discernment. And as you point out in your chapter, the words social justice oftentimes aren't even defined, and it's important to get a good definition. And then if we have an accurate definition, we can see how it correlates with biblical ideas. True?
Sure, I completely agree. You know, social justice, as it's become known, is really not what our founding fathers and those of previous generations would have thought about. You know, there was in previous generations this really issue of accountability, and there was also the concept of personal responsibility, that we were accountable for how we acted. We were very much responsible for ourselves, and that, you know, obviously there was the spirit of beneficence and charity, that, you know, people help people and churches help people. But so often is the case now that statism is the answer in the minds of people. And what I read about in the book, 10 Issues That Divide Christians, I document kind of how we've morphed into the belief that government is the answer, and that really, if you have the litmus test for you having a compassionate heart is that you support big government as the answer. You know, now, who in the world doesn't want the good of people? Of course we want the good of people, but we're kind of in a dangerous place that we're only allowing that to be defined in terms of you agreeing with whatever most recent expansion of the government reach is taking place, and ultimately that is not for the good of the people. True social justice is seeking the highest good of others, which is love, and true love is to seek the highest good of people, and just growing the government, enslaving people, really defining the future of people via government fiat is not compassion, it's not justice, and it's certainly not love.
You know, another aspect of this gets into economics. And of course, we've talked about this before with Wayne Grudem and Jay Richard and others. But in your book, you talk about the fact only 53% of American adults believe capitalism is better than socialism. But if you look at the younger generation, and certainly that has been your target audience, and it's really kind of our new target audience here at Point of View. We really want to reach out to the younger generation. It breaks down to about one-third, one-third, one-third. About one-third under the age of 30, certainly under the age of 35, except say capitalism is better than socialism. One-third say socialism is better than capitalism, and one-third really don't know, which means that two-thirds really are not convinced that the free enterprise system is a good way to go, and that certainly factors into the discussions that people are having about social justice, aren't they?
Well, it is, and you know, that quote you mentioned is on page 75 of my book, that 53% of American adults believe capitalism is better than socialism. And, you know, when I began to read things like that, I thought, you know, excuse me while I go have an aneurysm. I mean, my goodness, that we are so content to hand over copious amounts of our earnings to the government, to be redistributed, to be spent in ways that may egregiously conflict with our values, and then often to be just wasted. But you're talking about young people, and so many young people, they just don't get entrepreneurialism and the initiative and the proactivity that really built our nation. And so many young people, and not the least of reasons is because they were pretty much conditioned to think this way in the secularized school system, but so many young people don't know how to do America. Now, Kerby, we do this annual event we call Truth for a New Generation that we've done for 23 years in one form or another. We'll bring together all these great speakers like Josh McDowell and Ben Carson and Johnny Erickson and Eric Metaxas. And this year, T&G, Truth for a New Generation, is September 5 and 6. But, among other things, and we're telling young people how to America, if I can sort of coin a phrase, because so many, even Christian young people, they really don't understand that a socialist, government-run utopia is in no way what our founders intended.
Well, and I think it's one of the issues that is surfacing time and time again in justice. You've talked about homosexuality. Let's get into that. Even today, we find out that a judge in Pennsylvania has declared that a law that was passed in part of actually an amendment of the state constitution that defined marriage between one man and one woman is unconstitutional. Every time we turn around, we're hearing the phrase marriage equality. Well, the argument that you get is that, well, if we really want to be just, we should allow individuals of opposite sex or even same sex to be able to get married. How does that conflict with biblical ideas if indeed the goal here is social justice?
Well, let me say all people, on the issue of marriage, all people already had equality. Any man can marry a woman. So there are a number of things at play in the mainstreaming of the homosexual agenda to redefine marriage. And let me say this, as a minister of the gospel, obviously I am called by my Lord to love people, and I do. But loving people means sometimes telling people not what they want to hear, but what they need to hear. And the last thing that we should do to people that are struggling with same-sex attraction is to tell them that it's okay, that they were born that way, that it's equal to heterosexuality. Because, Kerby, when I was at Liberty University in the 90s, doing my master's degree, I minored in developmental psychology. With a professor from UCLA, one of the classes that we had dealt with, what are the contributing factors to same-sex attraction? And these judges, and this is a tragedy of Shakespearean magnitude, really, how America's judicial system has been co-opted, hijacked, commandeered by a well-funded publicity campaign of 45 years. Folks, you've got to understand that there's never been a scientific study that proved people were born gay. There's never been any revelation from God that negated the previously held moral code of 2,000 years. There's never been a redefinition of family and a redefinition of marriage as being equal, male and male, female being equal to a male-female traditional heterosexual monogamy. And here's the thing. There's never, ever, never been anything that has suddenly made a certain behavior a civil right on par with a person's ethnicity. So, judges are overturning the vox populi with certain presuppositions that are just false. They believe that it was somehow decided that the right to redefine marriage, the right to gay marriage, was a civil right, a constitutionally protected civil right. When did all of this happen? And it's resulted in even things like in February, Eric Holder of the Justice Department saying that with a wave of his hand, the current DOJ would not recognize any of the Defense of Marriage amendments. And Eric Holder said, quote, that he was going to, quote, expand the rights of homosexuals in all 50 states. Yeah, well, first of all, the Department of Justice is not a legislative body. So I was not aware that Eric Holder and the DOJ could, quote, give anybody rights. They are to enforce the existing laws, not create new ones. And I've said this probably in the times that we've interviewed together before, Kerby, but we are much like ancient Israel in Judges 5, verse 8, that says, speaking of Israel, when they chose new gods, there was chaos within the gates. We in America, some have abandoned belief in the God of the Bible. Others have been raised and not been taught the founding principles that America's creators died for. And so we're several generations in. This is why it is so necessary that we do apologetics. This is why the work you do, Kerby, is so vital. And this is why we want people to come to Truth for a New Generation, September 5 and 6 in Spartanburg, South Carolina, because we're several generations into an America that doesn't know God or country.
We'll take a break and continue our conversation with Alex McFarland right after this.
Without reason, you took the blame. You were rejected time and again. You loved your accusers the same as a friend. I wanna love without love, I am nothing, and I wanna love the way you love, 'cause without love, I am nothing. You were beaten.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes with Alex McFarland. If you'd like to join us real quickly, we might not have time for a call today. We'll get to some of those perhaps tomorrow. But if you want to try real quickly, 1-800-351-1212. We might slip one in. But Alex, just before we went to the break, you mentioned your conference. I've alluded to that before. We've done a pretty good job of the past of promoting some of these various apologetics conferences. Yours is September 5th and 6th. Tell our listeners that might want to come and have a chance to learn a little bit more about some of these very important issues, because after all, you have been able to get a incredible lineup of speakers, and it's a great way for them to meet you face to face and actually sit under the teaching of some of those great speakers.
Well, thank you so much for asking. And let me just say thank you so much for the way that you've promoted the conferences over the years. You you're, in addition to being an incredible communicator yourself, you've been a great ally in our quest to equip the American church to defend the faith. But I got to tell you, I came to the Lord through apologetics when I was in college, and I'm just still so excited to see people equipped to present, explain, defend the faith. This year, September 5 and 6, we're in Spartanburg, South Carolina, September 5 and 6, and a great venue. And let me say, moms and dads, this is the event to bring your young people to. Now, Kerby, it's for all ages. But we've got great people like Josh McDowell, Sean McDowell, Eric Metaxas, who wrote the best-selling book on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Johnny Erickson Tada, Gary Habermas, maybe the world expert on the resurrection of Christ, David Barton, Michael Lacona, pretty sure Todd Starnes of Fox News is going to be there. He's been touring the country with his book, God Bless America.
Right.
And we're pretty sure we're going to confirm him. All these others are confirmed. And then, of course, Dr. Ben Carson, former head of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. And this is live in person. And in addition to the great keynotes, with the Chuck Colson Center for Worldview, we've got a national briefing on personhood and human rights. Now, last year we did this national briefing on religious freedom. This year we're going to have a roundtable with some of the great scholars from the Colson Center, like John Stonestreet, to talk about personhood and human rights. And then, there's so much to tell. I mean, more than 20 breakout sessions on apologetics in the church, building a biblical worldview in the lives of your children, young people, how to not lose your faith at college, how to reach atheists, secularists, Muslims, how to defend the fact that America was founded as a theistic nation, founded on theistic principles, and, of course, for teachers, continuing ed credits. But the website for the conference, Truth for a New Generation, is the website truthforanewgeneration.com. And Kerby, I'll tell you, last year we had people from 35 U.S. states, and a lot of that success I attribute to the partnership in promoting with you, my friend. So for God and country, we press on, and we thank you for your participation.
September 5th and 6th, be a great opportunity. Be there or be square, as they always jokingly say. Yeah. But let's, for just a minute, you mentioned John Stonestreet. I was just with him when he spoke for us at the International Society of Christian Apologetics, and he made a good illustration of two of the chapters in your book. The younger you are, the more likely you are to be pro-life. But he then went on to say, the younger you are, the more likely you are to drive a woman who wants to get an abortion to an abortion clinic. The younger you are, the more likely you are to believe in marriage equality. So I think it illustrates that even when individuals, young people, come to a biblical conclusion, like being pro-life, because it's probably the most pro-life generation in American history, it's not necessarily based upon biblical ideas. It's based upon kind of social justice ideas. And so it seems to me that even when a person gets the conclusion right, sometimes the way in which they get there is not biblical. And it seems to me that we have a lot to really work on in terms of educating this next generation, don't we?
Well, we do, because anytime your bellwether is emotion, you might some of the times land on the right answer to the question, but we have to have something more. We have to have something beyond just opinion or the mindset of the hour, or certainly the vicissitudes of our changing emotion. We need an objective standard for truth, and that is the Bible. Now, God has revealed himself to creation really in four ways: creation, conscience, Scripture, Savior. And these are best understood in terms of God existing and God being knowable. And all of these, I would say, creation having a creator, our conscience pointing to the reality of a eternal, transcendent, moral lawgiver, Scripture being the revealed Word of God, preserved, authoritative, and then Christ being the incarnation of the eternal God who taught truths about salvation and the kingdom and rose from the grave. All four are, I believe, defensible as being objectively true, historically factual, and personally knowable really, Kerby, by compelling lines of evidence, we can defend Christianity. And let me say, this might be a bombshell to a lot of people. I mean, this might really be an epiphany that, you know, Kerby, faith claims can be tested.
Yes.
And Christianity, we have some faith claims. You know, God, the Bible, Jesus, Islam, secular humanism, all worldviews make faith claims. And I would submit, and to the young person who's allowing his emotions to be the you know, moral compass, let me say, Christianity alone is a worldview whose faith claims can be objectively defended. And that really rises the Christian worldview above the fray of mere subjectivism. And, you know, the claims of any belief system can be refuted as false or defended as true. And so, you know, in a radically pluralistic culture like you and I discussed at the beginning of the program, now I think it would be a kind of an epiphany to a lot of people really to understand that, you know, faith claims can be tested.
Yes.
They can be validated or refuted. And so we've got to have something beyond just opinion and emotion to be our moral guide. And friend, I would urge that you take God's revelation, the Bible, the only book shown to be inspired, given by God, as our content for determining not only spiritual realities but moral truth.
Been talking today with Alex McFarland. His book is entitled 10 Issues That Divide Christians. Let me one more time encourage you to go to truthforanewgeneration.com. That is the conference that will take place September 5th and 6th. We've already mentioned Josh McDowell, Sean McDowell, Ben Carson, David Barton, Eric Metaxas, Tim Wildman, Johnny Erickson Tada. Individuals have been on this program on a fairly regular basis. Musical guests Charles Billingsley and others. And of course, Alex McFarland will be there. And quite a lineup, and it would be a great opportunity for you to be educated. Let me encourage you to think about sending a young person to that conference as well. And Alex, I appreciate your stand for all these issues, and thank you for being with us today here on Point of View.
Well, thanks very much. We've got an early bird special, a registration deal that ends June 1st, and there's opportunities for a personal meet and greet with Ben Carson after the event. A lot of great stuff. I am planning my 2015 calendar. So, folks, if you want to do an apologetics event in your church or in your town, go to my website, contact me. We'll talk to your people. We'll equip your church. I will debate your local atheist if you set it up. It will be fun. And, Kerby, for God and country, we must press on. Am I right?
That's right. And again, the theme of the conference, life and liberty given by God. So it's been great to have you on the program today.
God bless you, my friend. Thank you for all you do. It's an honor to work with you.
We're going to say goodbye for today and encourage you to find out a little bit more about some of the issues that we've been talking about today. Might mention that tomorrow Dr. Stephen Myers is going to be with us, going to talk about the origins issue. George Marsden will be with us. I don't think we've ever had him on the program, so you're going to learn a little bit more about history, and so all of that is taking place tomorrow. But just before we finish off the program today, let me encourage you to go to the website, pointofview.net. Both of the books we've talked about, the Max Lucado book and the Alex McFarland book, are available in our Point of View store. We have the video of Alex McFarland talking about his book. We have articles about both of these individuals, and we have links to both of their websites. Lots of great resources, all available at the website pointofview.net. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Gerald for their help behind the scenes. Have a great day. See you back here tomorrow.
You have been listening to Point of View. For materials offered on the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've